I'm the Director of Product Management for Qualys Web Application Scanning. And part 2 of this presentation, Remy will come and take care of the discussion about Web Application Firewall. So one thing you might have noticed here is that the title is Web Applications and APIs, the soft belly of the cloud. I've actually added "and APIs" because kind of a theme of the conference, you may have already seen it, is APIs and securing APIs. So I had that added to the title slide just to emphasize that a little bit. So the agenda, we'll talk about web apps and APIs in the cloud specifically. I'll go into web application scanning cloud app here at Qualys, a review of what it is, what's new, and the roadmap. And then Remy will come and talk about the same for web app firewall. And then Q&A will be at the Q&A bar today. So first of all, I think everyone knows insecure web apps and APIs are a problem. Your business depends on web apps, first of all. Applications, APIs can really be a foothold into your organization. And even if you have the most secure infrastructure in the world, if one of your developers at your organization has coded an application, say, with a SQL injection vulnerability, that can allow them into and lead to a data breach. Another kind of root cause of the issue with web application security in general has been the fact that developers are not really incentivized to build secure applications. They're definitely incentivized to build applications that perform well, not too slow. They're incentivized to build applications that work correctly, have the functionality that it needs. But the third leg of that stool is security. Developers typically, in most cases, aren't being judged or rated or given a performance review on how secure their applications were that they were writing. And so that's been a problem historically. And then cloud-based apps, you've heard a lot about today, are very easy for developers to deploy without any review. And so, given that and the fact that web apps are being targeted, and we know they're being targeted from the 2018 Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report, it's the most common data breach pattern, web applications are. It's also the top hacking vector, if you look at that report. So this is something that can't be ignored. And some examples of breaches that have occurred recently due to this are listed here. I know some of them, most recently, have been due to APIs, not through a browser-based web application. MyFitnessPal, we're not sure about. I tried to get details on that one, but that was a mobile app, and in the vast majority of cases, mobile apps are speaking REST APIs to the back end. And the way and how many data records were lost in that breach, most likely that was an API security problem. So apps and APIs are everywhere. You have your public-facing, internet-facing web apps. You have your internal web apps that your organization, maybe your employees are using. New apps under development all the time. And you also have APIs being built all the time. And then probably most scary is the fact that developers can deploy their apps very quickly in any of the cloud platforms and have them up and running, possibly talking to backends that have very sensitive data that your organization needs. So let's talk about web application scanning at Qualys, and just a quick review of what it is and a little bit about some of the features. So Qualys WAS, as we call it, is a leading dynamic application security testing tool, or a DAST type of tool. So DAST means that it needs a running instance of the application or the APIs to actually do its scan. It's not a static code analysis tool, which oftentimes are prone to false positives and overwhelming amounts of results. A dynamic type of approach is more about scanning an application in its environment where it's actually running, whether that's a production environment, a staging environment, QA or dev. All we need is a running application to scan it. And it can be external facing, it can be internal facing. It doesn't matter. As long as it's up and running, we can scan it. And it's, of course, delivered to the cloud platform. It's not a separate tool you download, install on your laptop, run your scan. It's all managed, scans are launched, results are reviewed, all through the platform. And its purpose is to identify application layer vulnerabilities. So we're talking about things like OWASP top 10, cross-site scripting, SQL injection, XML external entity vulnerabilities, open redirects, cross-site request forgery, deserialization vulnerabilities. I mean, the list goes on and on. But the common theme is that they're all application-based, so it's all HTTP request and response. So attackers can craft a specially formulated request, make that request through a tool like some sort of a hacking tool, and find the vulnerabilities and then exploit them. Besides OWASP top 10, Qualys WAS also identifies CWE IDs, which is common weakness enumeration. I'm sure most everyone knows what a CVE is. A CWE is also from MITRE, but a CWE is a classification, a vulnerability classification system. And we map the Qualys QIDs in WAS to both OWASP top 10 and CWE IDs. So you can have that mapping when you need it. And then Qualys WAS more and more is starting to detect web-related CVEs. So things like vulnerabilities in Apache Struts, which is a framework that developers use to build web applications. Tomcat, WebLogic, Spring Framework, all these different frameworks and development platforms that application developers use to build their applications or their APIs. Historically, WAS didn't have those CVE checks, but now we're adding more and more of them, especially for the high-profile ones that you hear about a lot. So WAS does include automated crawling. This is really important when it comes to a dynamic application scanner because you start with a URL, and the scanning engine includes a browser engine inside of it so that web page, that initial web page is loaded in the browser, the page is rendered, and from there links are followed, forms are submitted, and that automated crawling or spidering of the application is important because the goal is that you have to find all web pages, all URLs, all requests, AJAX links, whatever the case is. You have to find the content, everything in the web application in order to be able to test it. And WAS does support Selenium scripts. So Selenium is a suite of tools typically used by QA teams, but Selenium script technology is a way to improve the crawling, because there are some cases if an application has some sort of a complex authentication, like a single sign-on or multi-step authentication, or a business workflow, an automated scanner can't follow that or make it through that type of workflow. So the Selenium script allows the scanner to, once it's uploaded into WAS, that script can be played back during the scan to navigate through that workflow. And a unique feature for Qualys WAS is actually malware monitoring comes as a bonus. So malware detection service, as we call it, or MDS, is something that we actually used to sell as a separate product. The decision was made to bundle that now with WAS. So this is a differentiator for us in that it's a separate type of scan, and its purpose is slightly different. Its purpose is to identify malware that may have made it onto your public-facing websites. So it's not about finding vulnerabilities. It's about scanning on a daily basis, so monitoring your web apps that you have a lot of visitors, say your corporate website, any sort of a really high-volume website. You can scan for malware to make sure you're not getting infected through some other means. May not have been a web app vulnerability, may have been some other means. So that's a bonus that's included with Qualys WAS. And so the product, we really built it for the enterprise in mind. I'm going to go through just some of the features real quick. Unlimited scans, unlimited users, role-based access control. The tagging mechanism in the platform is used in WAS as well. Scheduled scans, ad hoc targeted scans, multi-site scan functionality, which is really powerful when you have thousands of web apps to scan over a weekend, say, and you don't want to actually be there. You can retest individual vulnerabilities. You don't need to run a whole new scan. And the malware scanning I mentioned. Massive scalability. maintains detection history. So every time a new vulnerability is identified in a web application, we'll make note of all the metadata around that, the time that it was identified, the request and the response that occurred when that detection happened. You can run scheduled reports, you can customize your reports, and we added support for Swagger earlier this year, which I'll talk about more in a minute. And of course, for integrating with other types of systems, we have a really robust API in WAS. We have some customers that are only using the API and aren't really even logging into the UI. So it's a very capable type of API. That allows for things like integration with your CI/CD environments. We have a really unique integration with the Qualys WAF. It includes a scan trust feature as well as virtual patching. And we have a bidirectional integration with BugCrowd, which is a company that manages bug bounty programs for companies. So what's new in Qualys WAS? I'm just going to go through some of the highlights from the past year here. So first of all, scanning REST APIs. Again, really becoming more and more important all the time. So we've added support for Swagger. Swagger soon to become a name change to OpenAPI. So essentially, SmartBear is a company that developed Swagger specification for defining, describing a REST API. They've donated that to the OpenAPI initiative, so that's the new in version 3 will be called OpenAPI instead of Swagger. But it's really the same thing. It's just version 2, version 3. So Swagger is a specification, if you're not familiar, that describes a set of REST APIs. The Swagger file is typically available from the dev team. There's tooling that they have to output a Swagger file. And to scan a REST API in Qualys WAS, you simply need to define the URL as the Swagger file, which is typically a JSON format. And then from that point on, when you launch a scan, the API endpoints, based on the information in the Swagger file, the WAS scanning engine understands how to invoke that API and how to do its testing. And it's currently in WAS, we support Swagger version 2 in JSON format. Automating scans in CI/CD with Qualys WAS. So I wanted to use an example of one of our customers that helped us develop this feature. We have actually a Jenkins plugin that we've developed for WAS so that during a CI/CD build process, WAS scans can be kicked off against an application. And the way that works is developers are typically writing code, checking in code to some sort of a source control or repository. And a CI/CD tool like Jenkins is sitting there monitoring for these check-ins and then builds the code, compiles it, builds it, and can also be configured to push out a new version of the application to various environments. And so in this case, the customer was in a dev environment, but Jenkins can be configured to push it out to staging, dev, QA, or whatnot. So in this case, our customer was using our Jenkins plugin, and what they did was configure the plugin to make an API call. Makes it very easy in the plugin to the Qualys WAS API. So after that new code was running in the dev environment, that API call was sent out to simply kick off a WAS scan to that dev environment, that web application running there. And so the web application scanning engine is embedded in every Qualys scanner appliance that's out there. So if you're not using WAS, maybe you're using VM, and you have scanner appliances, you actually have the WAS engine ready to go. It's available today. And so this customer was actually successfully using our Jenkins plugin to get testing and scanning done early so they could catch vulnerabilities before it got to like a QA or later stage environment. One thing that this customer actually did help us a bit because they, to make the API call, their environment, Jenkins is internal, so they had to actually, every call external had to go through their web proxy. Our first version of the Jenkins plugin didn't support web proxies, so we added that feature, pushed to I think it was 1.0.1 out, and so that works for them now. And there's this screenshot of the Jenkins plugin for WAS. We're working on version 2 of this right now. Should be available first quarter. The version 2 is going to support things like freestyle projects and make it easier to use. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk about manual testing. So I used to be a pen tester. Well, first I was a developer. I wrote web applications, and then I became a pen tester, and I broke applications. So manual pen testing is always going to be important. Dynamic scanning with WAS is definitely one piece of the AppSec puzzle. It's a critical piece because we don't have enough skilled pen testers to test all of our applications. But the thing is, there's certain types of flaws, like business logic flaws or some convoluted authentication error, that only a manual pen tester would really be able to find. So for your really business-critical applications that handle your most sensitive data, I definitely recommend manual pen testing to supplement scanning. Scanning is not the entire picture. So we understand that at Qualys, and on the WAS side, we support integrations to help with this. We have a bug crowd integration. We have an integration with Burp Suite, which is the #1 application pen testing tool used by thousands of application pen testers around the world. And then we partner with consulting shops to offer those manual pen testing type of testing approaches. So the integration that we have with Bug Crowd, it's a bidirectional integration. And so Bug Crowd researchers who have signed up for bug bounty programs, they may have vulnerability findings that they have submitted. If those are reviewed and approved, those can be imported into Qualys WAS so that you can view your WAS scanner findings right alongside manual findings from one of the researchers. But even better is that if you are running a bug bounty program with Bug Crowd, Qualys WAS scan findings can be pushed into Bug Crowd's platform. And that helps make your bug bounty program more efficient because you don't really want to pay bug bounties out on simple things like reflected cross-site scripting. You really want to pay the bounties on the more complex vulnerabilities that a scanner can't find. So if Qualys WAS can find 50 issues, those should be excluded from the bug bounty because you already know about them. Qualys WAS burp extension. So this is something we just released about 3 months ago. Similar type of solution in that findings from Burp Suite, as a pen tester is testing an application, can be easily pushed into Qualys WAS, again for that centralized viewing and reporting, very seamlessly, without ever having to leave the Burp environment. We've had this Burp integration for a while, but it's been more of a manual, export an XML file and then import it into WAS. The Burp extension, I would say, increases the usability by about 90%. So it's available today in Burp's BApp store. Burp has a store they call BApp for all the extensions that various people have been writing for the tool. And here's a screenshot of that. We have a 5-star rating so far, so far so good on that. Okay, let me talk about enhancements a little bit more detail. I'm not going to cover everything specifically here, but it just goes to show that there's a lot of progress being made in the evolution of Qualys WAS. And in January, we introduced vulnerability detections for CMSs, things like Joomla, Drupal, WordPress. We updated the mappings to Qualys, to the OWASP Top 10 2017 version. In April is when we came out with the Swagger and the Swagger support and the Jenkins plugin. And then we also released a Chrome extension called Qualys Browser Recorder. Qualys Browser Recorder, or QBR as we call it, is a Chrome extension allowing you to record your browser activity, and then you can save that activity as a Selenium script. So Qualys Browser Recorder actually outputs Selenium scripts, and then those Selenium scripts can be imported into WAS and do that playback I mentioned to get through workflows or complex authentication. We added a feature to test authentication. So if typically with a web app scan, authentication is the trickiest piece. The test authentication feature streamlines that process. In May, we introduced a new type of report. This is based on, we had multiple customers asking for a different type of report, so we output a new V2 of the CSV report. We introduced in June server-side template injection, also a number of detections for remote code executions, including rich faces, WebLogic, and the Spring Break vulnerability. The Spring Break vulnerability was a pretty nasty issue in the Spring framework, Spring Data REST framework. In July, we introduced that burp extension. Also the ability to cancel a scan, but get results up until that point. Interestingly enough, previously to this enhancement, if a Qualys scan was running for, a WAS scan was running for, say, like 4 or 5 hours, and maybe you needed to cancel it for some reason because the scan window was ending, you'd have to cancel it, but you wouldn't get any results. So all the 4 or 5 hours were kind of wasted. Now you can cancel that scan and get results for at least up to that point of the scan. And then, in September, one of the big ones was the browser engine upgrade. So I mentioned earlier that the scanning engine in WAS has a browser engine internal to it. We upgraded that browser engine because it was getting a few years old, and so it wasn't working very well with some of the new JavaScript functions and JavaScript features that have been introduced. So that browser engine upgrade has really proved to be very helpful in terms of better crawling of the web applications. And we introduced a few more features there, including another detection for RCE and prime faces. And just last month, we had a couple of additional, these are all CVEs that we've introduced. Blue M file upload, arbitrary file upload. That was pretty bad because people could upload like web shells to the server and cause all kinds of havoc. And then another CVE for Telerik. Roadmap. All right, so this is what's coming. Next month, we have some detections coming, including for XPath. We have improved search capability in the knowledge base in WAS, especially being able to search on like CWE ID, which you haven't been able to do yet. Combining burp and bug crowd findings into a single report, as well as WAS. All 3 types of findings can be going into one report. Ignoring fine limit. Actually, the last 2 here are actually functionality and features that the VM product has, and so we'll get requests, hey, we can do this in VM, why can't we do it in WAS? So we're adding the ability to, when you ignore a finding in WAS, to provide a time, or a number, like say, only a time limit for this ignore. I can only ignore it for like 90 days or 30 days. You can now be able to do that coming next release. And then a launch now for scheduled reports. In January, we're going to be releasing a nice feature called Custom Scan Intensity. Right now in WAS, if you want to run a scan, you basically have a choice of 5 pre-canned intensities from lowest to maximum. With Custom Scan Intensity, you'll be able to fix that, or you'll be able to customize that. On Jenkins plugin version 2. February for March, we're going to introduce additional detections, support for TLS 1.3, security header tests, enhanced crawling, and integration with CyberArk PIM for an auth vault. So credentials stored in a web application currently don't come from any auth vaults. We're going to add support for CyberArk for that. And then what we're really excited about is coming in more Q2, Q3 timeframe, which is adding WAS data to Elasticsearch. So policy compliance module actually is going first. WAS is coming up right behind that. So that once we have the data in Elasticsearch, we're going to be able to really do a lot of more things. We're going to have a new dashboard with the customizable widgets that you've been seeing a lot today. WAS will have that as well. And we'll also be modernizing the UI, which I'm super excited about because sometimes I get jealous about the new products, how well and how nice they look. So WAS definitely does its job, but it's time for UI updates. So we're going to be doing that. Adding support for OpenAPI v3 and support for Postman collections. So pretty aggressive roadmap, but some good things are coming. And finally, I just wanted to talk about something that you've already heard from Sumedh earlier today, but we have a new cloud app coming called API Security. API Security is a new app that we're going to be developing with our partnership with 42Crunch. In fact, they're here this week for the conference, speaking tomorrow, so be sure to attend their session if you'd like. And we're going to have a lot of nice capabilities around expanding our testing capability and protection capability around REST APIs. And this is going to be really good because now we'll have the browser-based web apps security from WAS, but we're also going to separate out and do the API testing in a much more comprehensive way when this module and when this cloud app is released. And with that, I'm going to ask my colleague Remy to join for part 2 of the presentation.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rémi Lemaire. I come from France. Try to say that very fast with a French accent. Fun. So I'll be talking about the web application firewall today. I've been told that we are running out of time, so we won't have time for Q&A, so we'll meet at the Q&A bar. That being said, I have a few questions for you. First is, how many of you have heard about Qualys WAF? Rough 10%. Second question, how many of you have a past experience with WAF or currently own a WAF? 20%. Okay. So, as an introduction, I will tell you that we've started developing our web application firewall back in 2013. And like Philippe said this morning, the security's biggest enemy is false positive and false negative. So we have designed a very custom inspection engine to minimize the amount of false positive and to have a very good detection rate. And I'm very proud to tell you that we've been actively blocking in zero-day mode every single major CVE in 2018. So that's a very good result. So by design, we've developed our WAF to integrate with WAS. And I will talk about that in a minute. The very first differentiator of Qualys WAF is the integration with WAS with a feature that we call Scan Trust. Scan Trust is the ability for WAS to scan the application through WAF and multi-evaluate both the application and get the final result from the WAF inspection, like would it have been blocked or not. And that allows WAS to know exactly and to present in a report the status of every single detection. Is it active, meaning exploitable, meaning it's not blocked by WAF, and then we need to remediate? Is it already fixed on the application side, or is it protected by WAF? And you can see the result here. Protected means WAF is actively blocking using an out-of-the-box template. The second major feature is the virtual patching. When detections are not proactively blocked by WAF, we can create a virtual patch. A virtual patch doesn't mean we patch the application or the backend server. We patch the WAF configuration to block and remediate the specific vulnerability. So this is a virtual patch. Actually, virtual patches are built on another type of feature that we call custom rules. These are user-defined rules. And you can see here a bunch of conditions that should be met to actively block a specific threat. And that's quite unique. So what's new in Qualys WAF? New supported platforms. We've released WAF back in 2017, and back then we supported AWS for cloud-based WAF, VMware, and Hyper-V. And this year, I'm happy to introduce Azure and Google, and also the Docker container. So the WAF container is already available. It has been released about 6 months ago. About WAF architecture improvements. So WAF is a reverse proxy, a regular reverse proxy. So we proxy the traffic on that reverse proxy. It sends the traffic back to the backend servers. It's clusterable within hybrid topologies. And like Harry said earlier, Qualys provide a whole set of security services for the cloud, including WAF. So it's clusterable across hybrid topologies. You can have your legacy data center, your cloud, and eventually maybe a container that you'd like to protect with a WAF container. It has load balancing capacities, SSL offloading, and we propose SSL implementations typed by groups to simplify the SSL implementation. So we're currently running version 1.5.3 of the appliance. And we are now able to protect web services and some REST APIs to a certain extent. Our WAF container integrates with Docker host, and I will explain that in a second. We have improved performances by optimizing our inspection engine, and we can now schedule the upgrades, which can help. And of course, it is orchestrable through Qualys API. Let's talk about Docker container. So WAF container is able to communicate with the Dockerd service to protect automatically all the applications served by specific containers, which are identified based on label. So if you label a specific container for a specific application, the WAF container is automatically able to detect and identify the appropriate backends, meaning you don't need to manage your server pool manually. It's all done automatically. So it works with a single host using a WAF container, or with several hosts with a regular appliance or a container, meaning the integration with Docker works both with the container and the regular appliance, meaning that works in the cloud, on-prem, you name it. About security improvements. So like I said, the virtual patch has been upgraded this year to take advantage of the custom rule technology. And we can now, using custom rules, do virtual patching, event exception, inspect some web services and REST APIs. And with the custom rules, you can do many things. Actually, it's up to your imagination. You can inspect the requests or the response, the client or the server properties. Do things like, hey, if my request comes from France, and if the query string contains the parameter Remy, and if the value matches the regular expression, and then you can stack a bunch of conditions and take an action. The action can be an active blockage, or a redirection, or rewriting headers, and we'll keep improving custom rule features. About rule set and templates. So, like I said, Qualys own its inspection engine using a DAG-based technology, and that allows Qualys security researchers to program some WAF protections on the engine directly using a piece of Lua code. And that allowed us to create several templates, out-of-the-box templates, with a very good detection rate and minimum false positives on different type of applications and technologies. First, CMSs for content management systems. So we have a Drupal, one for Joomla, WordPress, Magento, but also different flavors of templates for JBoss, Outlook Web Application, SharePoint, Tomcat, you name it. And we'll keep providing new templates. And we also provide, I forgot to mention that, several Qualys generic templates for unknown applications or uncovered applications with specific templates. About Qualys WAF roadmap. So we have two roadmaps, actually. We have the standalone roadmap and the integrated suite roadmap. In late December, we will release an upgrade to the custom rule, and we will release also the community custom rule library to detail different type of use cases to help you actually write your own custom rules. And in 2019, we'll have a major appliance release, and I'll communicate more about that. If you have any question, please tell me later. We'll support TLS 1.3, HTTP, improved network management capabilities, because right now the reverse proxy contains a single network interface card, so we will split these interfaces to have one for management, another one for production, and eventually another one for synchronization for network clustering, which is currently not available yet. In late Q1, early Q2, we'll provide new templates for API generics, like we have Qualys generic templates. We'll release API generics, one for Microsoft ADFS, because as you know, it's very important to service provider or identity providers for SAML context, and one for JD Edwards. In Q2, we'll release the customizable dashboard in the context of the unified dashboard that Sumedh mentioned this morning, reports, and improved role-based access control. And in Q3, we'll finally be able to provide network clustering capabilities. And in Q4, we'll address another type of threat, which actually is the DDoS, botnets, anti-scrapping, that type of thing. About the integrated suite, in December, we'll provide the integration with asset inventory. So asset inventory is able to say, hey, that application is actually served by that backend with that specific certificate. That's also the integration with its third view, and that will be very interesting, because that will provide you the ability to make the link between the application and the IT. In January, we'll release the unified dashboard, hopefully. And in March, we'll empower WAS to be able to say, hey, that vulnerability is actually protected by that rule or that template. So, and I forgot to mention that, actually, the problem with operating a WAF is that today, WAF is under network and security responsibilities. And how does one create a WAF policy when one doesn't know nothing about the application or the security posture? It's like, hey, I need to create a WAF policy, but I don't know nothing about the application. Let's get in touch with the CISO team. And then you need to get traction with the InfoSec team, but it takes time. So that's why we provide the virtual patch capacity, so that the CISO team is able to create a virtual patch from within WAS, right? So they don't have to call the network or security team to say, hey, can you please create a mitigation rule for this or that type of vulnerability. So it's an instant patch. So in March, WAS will be able to say whether a specific blockage is due to a custom rule or a template or an HTTP profile. In Q2, hopefully we'll revamp the sitemap, which is currently available on WAS, so that we feed the sitemap with active discoveries, that's WAS, and passive discoveries from WAF to have a complete understanding of the application schema or sitemap, you call it the way you want. And in Q3, and that's a major improvement, we'll be able, with WAS, to actually retest different findings coming from burp or bugcrowd, like Dave said. We have an integration with bugcrowd. Hopefully, we'll have other type of integration with bug bounty actors. But the point is, we provide templates so that you can instantly deploy a WAF protection for your application, but also be able to cover and improve the WAF policy using burp reports or bug bounty findings. So first, WAS will be able to retest some specific vulnerabilities that have been exported by pen testers using a burp report or using a bug bounty program, so that we have a virtual cycle where Qualys is actually a hub for vulnerability management programs for both automatic and manual detections. And in Q4, we'll be able to integrate with CertView and eventually virtual patch the SSL implementation itself. Thank you.